the most recent team you were a part of, the hurricane relief team, is about as real. I mean, a soccer team will have another game, right?
Right.
But
Right.
that was real life, and I admired what you did.
Something I never want to experience again, but I'm so thankful that I went through it. And I really, in looking back, I believe that every team building experience I've been through prepared me for it.
Hey, teammates, welcome to another episode of It's All About the Team, and I'm fired up today because I have one of our YSU Penguins, Dana Bronsord. Welcome.
You know, that's the foundation of a team, is having someone to support you and push you and believe in you. I knew quickly that it was the right fit for me.
There's no substitute for time when it comes to building relationships.
Pressure makes diamonds, and I now know that's the motto I kind of live by.
Right. One of the things that a good teammate does is works hard.
Teach yourself how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. Thank you, Coach Tresso. I'm honored to be here.
I tell you what, this is going to be fun. I remember Dana when she was being recruited to play soccer at Youngstown State University, and now to see all that she's done and all that she's become a part of and all that she's accomplished, I think we can learn a lot from all of her experiences. So one of the things, Dana, that I remember with the warmest heart is your family. You know, I've had a chance to be down near home. And what high school did you go to?
Brook High School.
I saw it was Brook,
High
okay.
School, yeah.
Bud Rowe and all my friends at Brook, and is it Wellsburg?
Wellsburg, West
I
Virginia.
remember being there at an event with your parents, and just to see the love in the community and the love in the family. And so there's no more important team than that team at home.
Amen.
And so share with the listeners and the viewers what you learned about being a good teammate and building a team from mom and dad and family.
It makes me so happy that you know that about Wellsburg in Brooke County. And, you know, growing up, I thought it was normal to be surrounded by a community that provided so much support and love and knowledge of young athletes, young individuals, you know. And it really wasn't until later in life that I learned that wasn't the norm. Sad, but it was later in life that I learned that it wasn't the norm. You know, I thought parents and cousins and aunts and uncles and teachers followed you to all sporting events everywhere, you know, and activities. So it was a special thing that at the time and growing up, you didn't realize how special it was until, you know, certainly now I look back and, you know, that's what built me. You know, teamwork and community outreach is something that was a given and an expectation where I'm from. And, you know, my family beyond that is exceptional. Again, another thing that I thought was the norm. I'm an only child, so I certainly was spoiled by the love of both my mom and my dad. And I hope I'm not spoiled entirely, but by their presence and their time and their support, I certainly was spoiled by that and still am to this day. And, you know, that's the foundation of a team, is having someone to support you and push you and believe in you. So I had it at a very young, early age.
You know, many of our guests talk about whether it's their personal families or their community families or the teams they've been on, the companies, are the ones that cared about them. You know, and once they knew that they were cared for, then they had a chance to go and become what they could become. And you can feel that in your community. You know, you can feel that. And we're eventually going to talk about how you've brought that here to South Florida. But that's after we have our viewers learn a little bit more about you. So why did you pick Youngstown State to go play soccer?
Interesting. So my father actually played football at Youngstown State, and he was a Penguin, class of 70 to 74. And as a toddler, he drugged me to every football game in the ice castle you could imagine. And I loved Youngstown for my father and for what, you know, I was exposed to, but I actually wanted to do something different. I did. I didn't know enough about Youngstown except for the ice castle and the football games. And, you know, that's what he had exposed me to. And I knew I wanted to play soccer in college. From West Virginia, you know, I I was searching some of the schools in West Virginia and had been talking to some of the coaches, and it wasn't until after, one of my games, a coach approached me, Coach Jody Murphy, who fabulous lady. She asked if I wanted to play Division I, and I said, absolutely, for who? And she said, Youngstown State. And it stopped me in my tracks, and I got chills, and I said, I'd love to. It was immediate response, and I went a few weekends later for a host weekend. Missy LaFerrette, now Missy Birdner, was my host recruit, and she showed me a fabulous time. I actually met you on that recruiting trip. Feels like yesterday. I can remember the smell of Stambaugh Stadium, walking through the underneath halls and into the locker room, and I knew quickly that it was the right fit for me. Not because my father went there, but because it was that Ohio Valley feel that I got at Brooke High School in my community, with immediate support and belief, and I was about to be a part of a new team. Interestingly enough, we didn't have a female soccer team at my high school my freshman year. So growing up, I played on the boys' teams because we didn't have a girls' team. When I was old enough to make travel, my father took me to Pittsburgh, to Wheeling, to other places to be able to play travel with other female athletes. And one of my travel coaches that happened to coach at Bethany College said, what are you going to do in high school? And I said, I don't know. Can we start a team? And my freshman year, there were 4 girls that I knew played, one being my cousin and 2 of my other friends that we traveled around playing. And I thought, well, we need 7 more to make 11. So I recruited athletes and players, and we built a team. So at my senior year of high school, we made it to states and became state runner-ups. Wow. And it was an awesome experience. So I was a part of a new women's team in high school, and seeing that support and excitement and athleticism at Youngstown State, and it was the only option. It was the option, and I'm so thankful for that.
So Coach Murphy was your coach the first 2 years? Or?
Yes, I had the first 2 years.
So let's talk about your first 2 years at YSU. What did you learn about team as you think back to those first 2 years in a starting of a new program?
Right. That's a good question. A whole lot about team, because we weren't the best, right? We were players from all over, and a lot of local players. We had a whole lot of midfielders and not as many defenders and strikers, right? So we had to learn. We had to learn to play different positions. We had to learn quickly from each other, because typically in sports, when you're the freshman, the 3 years ahead of you have already gelled, right? And you're learning their way. That hadn't happened yet. That first team, that was actually one of my most memorable years. It was my first year at Youngstown. We gelled, and we gelled quickly. And I think it's because we were all so new and had similar yet different strengths. We had to pull it together. And now in life, there's lots of times where you have to start fresh and right. pull it together. And thinking back, that experience of that new, fresh team, lots of talent in different ways, taught me, and certainly under the guidance of Coach Murph and the upperclassmen, how to pull it together and make a team gel and do well.
So who came in as the coach after Coach Murphy?
Liz Bartley.
Liz, yeah, okay. So anything that she did differently to build team that you learned?
Yes, 2 completely different coaches. And that's my junior year, and I think for the whole team, it was an adjusting period, because her style was much different than Coach Murphy's style. And it took a little bit of time for, I think, us to adapt to that. She brought an assistant coach, Brian, with her, and he had his own way as well. So our junior year was a growing year. And I think, again, brings the point of adversity, learning under a different leader. Yep. One thing I learned that year is I started playing not to make mistakes. And that was a big mistake. Yeah, right. Right? I was trying to play the way maybe the coaches wanted us to play, or the style of the game, and lesson learned. Because when you're playing not to make mistakes, you sure make a whole lot of them. Right. And right. You're not you. You don't play you, or you don't do you. So I learned a lot that my junior year, because I was playing how I thought someone wanted me to play, and not playing how I knew how to play.
Well, you know what I found interesting, and I think it parallels that, is our first year at YSU in 1986 seemed to be a year of just building relationships and trying to figure out who each of us was. And then after that first year, we really did pretty well. Well, same thing happened when we went to Ohio State. The first year was like, who are we? You know, how can we get some trust so that we can be ourselves and yet do what the team needs? And I often say there's no substitute for time when it comes to building relationships. You can't just say, oh, we got a relationship, because you haven't been through anything together. And so it's obvious as you talk about that, you know, that third year, people are going to get new bosses. People are going to get new situations. Their company might get acquired, whatever, and you're going to need to know that it takes a different kind of teammate and team building during those moments than it does during those times when we know who we are, and just it's a great reminder. So after your career, what made you want to go to PT school?
Well, I actually went to PT school. I started PT school during my college soccer career.
Okay.
Thanks to you.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember?
I
what
do
you did for
remember
me?
you coming in and needing to do something, but was I the athletic director yet?
You
I
were
think
the
I
athletic
was.
director.
Yeah,
You were the athletic director and
Yep.
the coach, and
Right.
I
do remember something.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll remind you.
Okay, remind
it was
me.
big.
Okay.
I took as many credits as I could every semester. My goal was, or quarters. We were on quarters, and I don't know if you're still on quarters. So I was applying to PT school my sophomore year of college, which typically you do your junior, senior year of college. You know, I took advantage of my collegiate scholarship, and I took 21 credits a quarter, and I applied my sophomore year, and I was so fortunate to get in. So my junior year, I would start PT school. And I was faced with a decision. The board of the physical therapy department let me know that athletes weren't able to be an athlete and participate in the physical therapy program. It was too much of a load. Tough news, because I had two more years on my athletic career. My fallback was to take my MCATs and go on to medical school. And there were a couple other athletes that were also accepted into the program. Lisa Rotuno, but she was finished with her basketball career. And Leanne Monkman, and she had already made the decision to pass track and go on to PT, and I was struggling with that decision. I saw you in the hallway underneath the stadium, and I don't know what it was about my demeanor, but you said, "You okay?" I said, "Oh, Coach, I have a decision to make," and I told you. You said, "Wait a minute. You've been accepted, but they don't want you to do both." And I said, "Correct." And you said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. I'm not ready to finish my sport. I'm struggling. And you said, "Do you think you can do it?" And I said, "I know I can do it." And you looked at me like you are looking now, and you said, "Come with me." You took me into the athletic department. You said, "Just give me a couple minutes." You made a phone call, and all of a sudden, I was given the opportunity to do both. And whatever you said, you told me, I told the PT department, give her a chance. If she doesn't remain in the top of your class, then please, at that time, have her make a decision. But allow her the opportunity. And because of you, I was able to finish my soccer career and complete physical therapy school within those 4 years.
Wow. I do.
So thank you.
Well, it's what we do, right? Is we care about our kids and try to help them, but that was quite a load.
I didn't know any differently. I didn't, right? So I've always been, I was always a multi-sport athlete. I was always expected and wanted to do well in school, and I just did. The tricky thing about soccer is our games weren't on the weekends always,
I
right?
know, yeah.
So we traveled a lot during season, and the requirement was I had to, if I was going to miss a test, I had to take it early.
Right.
It wasn't always fun, but that's what I signed up for, and an employee taught me recently, pressure makes diamonds. And I now know that's the motto I kind of live by, right? So I did it. And at the time, it didn't feel like the load that it maybe was. It's what I knew, and I would do it all over again times 10.
So our PT at that time wasn't the DPT yet.
No, it was the accrediting class for the master's program.
Right, for the master's. So then you went on to the University of Maryland
I did. So
for the DPT
actually,
to get the doctorate? Or
I went to their program for the Doctorate of Science in Physical Therapy. So there was a transitional DPT that just came out after I graduated.
Okay.
And I was gung-ho on wanting to teach, and I thought I better go further for a DSci. And it's actually a degree that is kind of extinct now. I've not taught at the university level, but I teach every day. I get to teach my staff, my patients, my teammates at Island Fit and Tuna Skin. So I feel that it gave me that exposure.
We need to get Florida Gulf Coast to start a PT program if they don't have it.
They have one.
Oh, okay.
They have
Well,
a PT program. Yes, they
you
do.
Could
I have
adjunct it in between your other businesses, which we'll talk about. I don't know if you have time for all that, but
they have a good PT program. I actually have a few employees that are in their program now. So that's always my goal is to every year hire support staff, which are physical therapy techs, in between their undergraduate and PT program, and groom them and prepare them for that next level.
So after getting your doctorate, you then began practicing there in the Baltimore, D.C. area.
I was practicing while I was...
Oh, while you were doing it.
So
Okay.
I was fortunate. My former employer, Potomac Valley Orthopedics, which is now Centers for Advanced Orthopedics, they helped me with that. So I worked full-time and went to school part-time, through the program.
Well, one thing that the listeners and viewers hopefully haven't lost sight of, one of the things that a good teammate does is works hard. And listening to, you chose hard, right? You chose to get things done. So when you were done with school, how much longer did you stay up in the D.C., Baltimore area?
I moved to D.C. right after graduation from Youngstown, so in 2001, and I was there officially through 2017.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so I originally lived right outside of D.C. in Rockville, and then later moved to Baltimore City, and made my own little hometown in each of those places, believe it or not. Found like people and created my own little Brooke County or Wellsburg or Youngstown where I went. And so I stayed there for quite some time. And it wasn't until meeting my now husband, I don't know that I ever would have left. Mm-hmm. But I'm happy that I did.
So what year did you meet Bill?
I met Bill in 2009.
Okay, and so that team became official what year?
Not until 2015.
2015. You had to give him 6 years of checking out and make sure all was good.
Right. I had to mix, and as did he.
Right. And so was Bill from South Florida originally?
He's from St. Pete, so yes,
St.
he's
Pete.
a Floridian.
Okay. And so you guys got married and then moved here to South Florida.
He had already lived here.
Okay.
Yeah, we met in Las Vegas, believe it or not. I know.
Okay.
What happens in Vegas doesn't always stay in Vegas.
Right.
We met in Vegas. He had a construction business and had lived here since 2001-ish. And we dated long distance. I struggled leaving what I had developed in Maryland. And he struggled with the idea of committing until he knew I was ready to give all that up, which I appreciate now, right?
Yeah.
So we dated long distance until 2000. I moved in 2012 and went back and forth. So we did a few years of, I lived two places. And
So what did you learn most about the team that you built or were on in Maryland? If you had to think about
they're still my
lessons
team.
learned.
They're still my team. I think back about how I got that job. I was fresh out of school. I had just moved to D.C. I actually had previously taken a job in Colorado where my clinicals were, another place that I don't know that you remember helping me with. But I had taken a job. My grandfather became ill. My grandfather was like my world, right? And so I made the decision to move back closer to home so I could be a part of his journey and his rehab and his recovery. So moved, not terribly close, but moved to D.C. where my cousin was. And back then you looked in the Washington Post for job placements, right? And I remember getting that Washington Post out, and there was a job that sounded right up my alley. It was an orthopedic practice looking to, strictly sports medicine, looking to open up physical therapy practices. And faxed my resume, and a gentleman by the name of Tom Montabell called me. And he called me and said, "What do you know about Wellsburg, West Virginia?" It was not what I was expecting to hear, right, in Washington, D.C. And I said, "Well, I'm from there." He played football at Princeton, and his teammate and roommate was Kent Jackford, the late Kent Jackford, who was from Wellsburg, West Virginia. Wow. And he said, "If you're from that town, you're built by that mold, and I want to hire you."
Wow.
Right? So there we go. That's small town Brooke County.
He knew what team you'd been on.
He knew what team I had been on. Yes. And he trusted me. I was fresh out of school, and he hired me to work alongside what is now the largest orthopedic practice in the country to start building physical therapy practices. I knew how to treat a patient, but I didn't know anything about insurance or healthcare laws. And, I learned under his guidance, and I learned because I had to, right? I had to learn the billing, the patient care, what the physicians who I was employed by expected. And my first hire was a girl from Hudson, Ohio, Katie Kickle Hernandez, and I hired her for the same reason he hired me. I knew the mold she was built from.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she played rugby at University of Ohio. OU. Mm-hmm. So it's, right, so that team that I built in Maryland is still my team today. They know I'm here with you today. They still call me frequently to ask for advice, and I feel like I've never left in a way because they're still a part of me. And that was a big city that I feel like I made a small town in and created everything I had learned in the past through athletics and team building just in a medical situation.
Hey teammates, I want to tell you about a project we're working on with Youngstown State University. One of the ways Ellen and I have decided to give back is through the Trestle Institute for Leadership and Teamwork. We've collected a set of successful business and nonprofit leaders to serve as guest servant leaders in partnership with the Sokolov Honors College to teach university students teamwork, leadership, and personal skills. We teach from a foundation built on gratitude, excellence, hope, love, and selflessness. If you're a young person or parent helping to search for a unique college experience, you can learn more at trestleinstitute.ysu.edu or ysu.edu. Links will be provided in the show notes. So you had to start over and build Island Fit. Mm-hmm. And so did you not come to South Florida and join an already team, or did you just come and start your own team?
I started my own.
Wow.
So the first time I came to see where Bill lived in Florida, we were driving down Fort Myers Beach. You've been to Fort Myers Beach. It's a little island, long, skinny island, and lots of retirees. And naturally, as a physical therapist, I'm looking for the physical therapy practice, and I didn't find one. So I said to him, where's your PT practice? He said, "Oh, we don't have one." So immediately I thought, okay, if this works, I'll make one. And a few years later, obviously, I had the opportunity to do that. And, I thought I was so fortunate to build a practice of many locations and lots of therapists with the support of orthopedic surgeons. I was able to essentially learn on their dime. I made mistakes. They supported me through those mistakes. We grew quickly, and from one clinic to 7 clinics, and it was something I had the pleasure and opportunity of being exposed to that I don't think many people can say. Right. And I thought if I'm going to do it again, I'm going to do it for myself. So I started a physical therapy practice on Fort Myers Beach.
And that was 2014?
2014.
2014. Mm-hmm. And so if you had to think through, okay, how do I build this team from scratch? Mm-hmm. Wasn't like they had lots of practices you could go and poach the team from or whatever. How did you go about building that team from scratch?
Like I had built the ones in Maryland, just in a different scale. We started clinics from the ground up, so I had to recruit. The difference in Florida is there's not a line of clinicians waiting to join your team. surprisingly, especially out on a barrier island. It's not easy to get to. It's not always convenient to live on, and it's expensive to live on. So I was faced with quite the challenge. In Florida, snowbird season, traffic is rough. It can take 2 hours to get off the beach at times. So immediately I went to the local university, FGCU, right? I thought if I could get one clinician or someone to be my teammate in this, I can make it grow. I was still going back and forth between Maryland, so I needed a strong teammate. I found actually a physical therapy assistant who had just recently graduated, and she was outstanding. She believed in me, and I believed in her from the get-go. And when I was still traveling back to Maryland, she operated my clinic while I was afar. And by year 2, I hired 2 more physical therapists, and it just continued to work and to grow. Community buy-in and community support is incredible on Fort Myers Beach. So as soon as one patient learned what Dana Walker at the time was all about in Island Fit, the word spread fast. So finding patients to be a part of our team, I call it Island Fitters, wasn't the challenge. It was finding the staff that was able to get to my practice has always been the challenge.
And so healthcare teams are different maybe than business teams, are different than sports teams. What's unique if the viewers are from the healthcare industry, and you've been in a lot of different teams, so what's the unique characteristics of a teammate or a successful team, either one, in healthcare versus what else you've experienced?
Healthcare is an animal this day and age. It's ever changing. Insurances obviously have a part on that, and it's becoming more and more difficult in the recent years to have autonomy and independence in healthcare without being limited. And I find that in the recent years to be the greatest challenge. To be a healthcare provider when I first started was I don't want to say an easy profession, but the sky was always the limit, and there were many opportunities. There's still opportunities now, but you have to really be passionate about it and want it, because it's not easy in healthcare. I'm not saying it's easy in any industry, but the reimbursements have changed, right? The scope of practices have changed, and you have to love what you do in order to succeed, because it's not about the recognition in healthcare. It's about making others better and being passionate, and that's your paycheck. And it's difficult to find clinicians that are 100% in it for that reason.
The path to becoming a physical therapist is a long, hard one. And do you find that because of the length of the struggle, when you do find one, you find someone who has that passion, there just aren't as many of them, or?
I think that the competition along the way skews the long-term outcome, right? You know, this physical therapist, when I started, were physical therapists. Now they are doctors of physical therapy. They're DPTs. Proud to have and, employ DPTs. I think that in the physical therapy profession, there have been some people that have gotten into it to be a doctor, not necessarily to be a physical therapist.
Gotcha.
And to be a successful physical therapist, you're seeing your patient 2 and 3 times a week, and you're spending an hour at a time with them, and you're part of their life, and they're part of yours. You're helping them return to their grandchildren, their pickleball, their daughter's wedding, right? And so you're really improving their values. And as a teammate and a team member, that's a no-brainer. That's easy to me, right? But sometimes in our profession, it's not always what I think the young clinician is going for. And that's been a challenge.
Well, like the key to any team, you got to find those ones that fit your team.
That's right.
So you went back and forth. You're building a business, and now all of a sudden you say, we're going to start an apparel line, tuna skin.
My husband actually started it. He had just started
Well, he had a
it.
construction company
He had
going
a
on
construction
too.
company. So I know.
I mean, hello?
Diversify.
Yeah, right.
You understand. Yes, he had a construction company, Tropical Pave Stones, and he loves to fish. And he was in search of a product that worked well in the water. Moisture wicking, SPF, UPF, we call it, fast drying. And so he was in search of a material that did all of those things. Cotton used to be the traditional shirt that was worn on the water, and cotton doesn't do well in the sun and the sweat, especially the salt water. So he started Tuna Skin. When I met him in 2009, it was very new. I actually helped him get it trademarked in 2009, and yeah, a hobby and a passion for fishing became an industry and a business, and that's another hat that we get to wear.
I know, and it's fun, and I love wearing my tuna skin. It's if I didn't have to wear my sweater vest today, I was going to sport some tuna skin.
Good.
And so somewhere along the line, and I know this is a little bit off of our topic of team, but with his love of fishing and all that, he's like a competition
Swimmer,
diver.
Yes, yeah.
Like I remember talking to him one time, he can like be underwater like 10 minutes or something crazy.
5 minutes and 45 seconds, I think, is his longest breath
5
hold.
minutes and
I know.
45 seconds underwater.
Right. Yes. He loves to swim. He loves to fish. He swam. He was a swimmer. He swam for Florida, and he loves the water. He's like a fish. Tuna skin, right?
Right.
And so free diving. He is a free diver, man. He likes to free dive for competition and to fish. And when I met him, he had some world records actually in spearfishing. And so it was usually the two of us out on the boat. And I thought, if he's going to be doing this, who's his safety? I need to learn this sport as well. So we went to the International School of Spearfishing, and I learned how to free dive as well, not near as well as him, but should something happen underwater, I learned how to be his safety and save him. But it's never had to happen, but I am always watching and aware when he's under of what to do should something take place.
Every free diver needs a teammate.
Every free diver needs a teammate.
Right?
That's right. Yes.
And so when you go down and stay for 5 minutes or something, what are you doing down
I
there?
don't go down and stay. So
Okay.
essentially what I learned is I need to know his max breath hold, and I count the seconds when he starts to descend. And then I start my descent about halfway through so that I know when he's coming up, I am there with more oxygen should we need it to help provide him with that before surface. Spear fishermen, the most common injury or misoccurrence in spearfishing is it's called a blackout, a cold water blackout, or surface water blackout. So usually blackouts happen right before the surface or right after the fisherman surfaces. So someone needs to be there to recover them. And so yes, he's 6'6", so having me as a teammate might be a little intimidating for him, but I learned what to do.
That's awesome. So you've been a soccer teammate, you've been a PT teammate, you've been a business owner teammate. We know you're a free dive teammate, but maybe the most impressive team activity I saw you take part in was after the hurricane.
Yes.
And you talk about Fort Myers Beach, whack, disappears almost. There you are living on Fort Myers Beach. And I remember seeing the things on TV, the way that you rallied troops, so forth. Tell our viewers a little bit about what that team hurricane relief or whatever was all about, because I know you were a big part of it.
Yes, thank you. Something I never want to experience again, but I'm so thankful that I went through it. And I really, in looking back, I believe that every team building experience I've been through prepared me for it. My husband and I stayed on the beach for Hurricane Ian. Many people would think that's crazy. And now being a Floridian, I'll never do it again. But I will say, we did not know what was coming towards us. At midnight the night before is when it became apparent the hurricane was making a turn and not heading for Tampa, but heading directly for Fort Myers Beach. My husband had just finished building our home in 2020, so it was built to new codes, and it was built to do its job in a Category 5 hurricane.
And it was up. I remember being
Yes,
there.
you've been,
So it was up higher, right?
Yeah, our first level is, the first ground level is just garage and pool and, entryway, and then our first living level is 16 feet above sea level. So it was built to the new codes. We had a family, friends of ours that are closer than you could ever imagine, that they were staying with us. They lived in a ground level home and they planned to stay with us. We were having dinner off the island in Bonita the night before. It was late. We did all of our hurricane prep and we were sitting in a little pizza place watching the news, and we watched that storm turn. At this point, it was a little too late to leave, and we had a family with us, right? So we went back to the house and we hunkered down and we prepared the best we could of what was to come. That storm was an animal, and it was terrifying. We stayed in our home. There was a 15 to 18 foot surge across all of Fort Myers Beach, and it's hard to understand unless you're in it. I have visitors today that say, well, was the water there too? The only way I can describe it is we were in the second level of our home, and it was difficult to see out the windows because the wind was blowing so hard. There were houses, there were boats, there were cars coming at us, and I couldn't see the gutters on my neighbors' homes because the water line was above it. And knowing that there were people in a lot of those homes and feeling helpless was awful. And there was nothing you could do. And that storm stopped on us for 9 hours. So 9 hours, 9 hours. We have a satellite device, but the storm I couldn't reach my family. My family knows that we have a satellite communicator. And when we're out fishing, I use that to let them know that we're okay or we're coming in. And I couldn't get a signal for some reason. And I couldn't communicate with them. So knowing their worry was extra difficult. But we woke up that next morning, and after those 9 grueling hours, not knowing what we were going to be faced with, we did what you do. We started rescue and recovery. As soon as the sun came up, we started searching in our neighbors' houses. We were able to rescue a sweet 78-year-old lady that was stuck in her rafters with her 2 dogs. You couldn't get a phone signal out for anything, so by foot and trying to find help was the only way. National Guard didn't make it on the island until over 24 hours later because the bridges had to be deemed safe.
Yeah, they got whacked.
Yeah, so you kind of go into survival mode. We unfortunately found some things that were very difficult to see, but we helped rescue a lot of people. I relocated 2 shoulders that first morning and 1 kneecap, and we immediately had a purpose. You actually called me on day 3. I don't know how I got your signal because I wasn't getting many signals at all, and offered, thank you, your home to us. We weren't ready to leave. We didn't have any power or water or resources, but we were there with a purpose, helping save people and get people to safety. So it wasn't until 7 days later that we were forced off the island. But in those 7 days, there was nonstop rebuild, and I've been in many situations in life where you fail and you have to pick yourself up and keep on going. And that's the easy part. When you look at your entire community that's absolutely devastated, it was complete devastation in their lives. And that was the hard part. That was the hard part.
It was so impressive, though, to see the way the community just said, okay, but we're Fort Myers strong, or whatever.
Fort Myers Beach strong. It's like no other.
Right.
The resilience is unbelievable.
It was just amazing to watch. And how did that team get organized? I mean, there's devastation, And how the heck did they get organized to create what they did?
Fort Myers Beach is a special place. We're led by a town council and an LPA, members that they just have resilience and love and passion for that island, like Wellsburg, West Virginia, right? Like Youngstown, Ohio. They're proud of it. They're proud to be part of it. And your neighbor is your family. And it happened fast. It happened fast. The leaders stepped up and, there was no time to look back. And, I think our mayor then, I think our mayor now, Dan Allers is now the mayor of Fort Myers Beach. And I saw him within an hour of sunrise, and I don't know how he got there, but he did, and he hasn't stopped since. And we've had a community. I'm blessed to be a part of a community like that. There was no time to look back.
And so that's been 3 years now, or 2?
September of 2022.
Yeah, so 2.5 years.
Yes.
So how has the team evolved and changed since that moment when all hands on deck? How has it evolved?
Well, it's certainly gone through some changes, and they've had challenges. And when you say that team, I'm referring to all of Fort Myers Beach.
Right.
FEMA's been a part of Fort Myers Beach and the changes. It's been difficult because what used to be a nice little sleepy beach town it's changing.
Yeah, it appears to be. That's why
it's changing quickly.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of people are struggling with that. And my heart goes out to and breaks for the people that are unable to still reside on Fort Myers Beach. Most people lost everything and unfortunately can't get back to where they were. Flood insurance is a challenge amongst many things. So Fort Myers Beach it's being rebuilt to new code and new standards. What used to be a maximum of 3 levels high is the bar's getting pushed and pressure starting to change. So it's no longer going to be that sleepy little beach town, quaint little beach town that it was known for. I actually believe it'll always be that quaint beach town. It's just changing. Things have to be higher and stronger, and for a good reason. I lived through that storm, and I wouldn't want anything beneath me but strength. So it's becoming a different place. It's going to be spectacular, though, just like the people that make it.
Well, when there's uncertainty, that's a whole different team dynamic. And, so after you rolled up your sleeves and just did whatever you had to do, then you move into okay, what are we, what's it going to look like next? And then you have that. I know I ran into someone saying, oh, gosh, the places that we just were our landmarks and they built our community and so forth, they're not going to be here, and they're going to build these, high-level monsters, and we're going to look like Fort Lauderdale. And, there's nothing wrong with Fort Lauderdale, but
right. It's not what they moved here for.
Yeah, that they wanted to be for. And so when you're in a period of uncertainty, leadership and teamwork and communication and all those things, are so critical. And when we're here in Southwest Florida, we watch the local news, and every once in a while you see a glimmer of how we're going to evolve. But if you had to have on your wish list what you hope this team looks like 10 years from now, and how it will be different than it is now, what would you say?
A team that's not afraid of change. A team that recognizes change is a good thing. Many people are afraid of change. We're all afraid of change, I think.
Yeah.
But I feel as if it's good to teach yourself how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. And we're in the uncomfortable right now in Fort Myers Beach. And I hope that, the team that continues to lead us from business owners to council, I hope they continue to be optimistic and believe in change and be comfortable in this uncomfortable. I give myself a challenge every day when I drive on and off the beach. There's a lot of devastation to look at, and there's a lot of things that still need rebuilt. but I'll be, if not every day, I don't find something new. I feel like homes and houses and businesses are popping up. And, I really force myself to see that every day, on and off, something new. Our new bridge in our roundabout just opened up 2 days ago, and traffic is so much better. And, I want to see the future team of Fort Myers Beach, the team that wants opportunity and the team that's open to change.
It's interesting because at universities, we talk about the reality that change is occurring. And I think cognitively, most everyone understands that. But it kind of stops at, but just don't change me.
Right.
So I agree we need a lot of changes, but don't change me. And so to me, that's the that's the challenge of surrounding yourself with people that, I know we might need change. I know the only thing constant is change, and you know what? If that means me, I need to be willing, because what's most important is the team.
That's right.
Right? And that's a hard one. But that's why we love talking about it. We love reminding ourselves. We like doing a little inventory of ourselves to see how we're doing, in terms of what does the team need. And that's why I thought you would be a perfect guest, because you've been on so many teams. And really the most recent team you were a part of, with the hurricane relief team, is about as real. I mean, a soccer team will have another game, right?
Right.
But that was real life, and I admired what you did.
Thank you. It's interesting when you're shut down, right, because of a hurricane. And, prior to the hurricane, business was good, life was good. Life still is good, and it's always good. But things were rolling, you're in motion, and you never really take the time to stop and think about, what could I do differently? What should I be doing differently? What could I do better? But when you're forced to shut down because you lost your business, you have to think about, what should I do differently? What could I do to be better? And there's a silver lining in everything. And when I look back, that's the silver lining in the storm for me, both professionally, personally. You learn the strengths of your business. You learn what maybe you should have rethought about your business, and some of those teammates that were part of your business. So I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I was forced to shut Tuna Skin Island Fit down. And rebuilding and reworking, I'm treating it just like I rebuild a patient from a surgery, right? In a different and better way, stronger than the storm.
I've often said that my most disappointing things personally and professionally gave me the greatest growth I ever had. And that's just the way life is. Well, it's been such a blessing having you on and sharing about your teams, and we needed to get more healthcare people on, because you're right, healthcare touches everybody.
It does.
And so it was fun having you on, and can't wait to see what the future holds. And till the next time, remember, it's all about the team.